Welcome in the latest episode of that SEC podcast. I'm your host, Michael Bratton. I go by SEC Mike on Twitter. And flying solo here after SEC Media Days. Cousin Shane, no, he didn't quit or anything. He worked so hard, I had to give him the week off. Spending that much time away from his family and his real job, so giving him a break. But he's going to be featured heavily on all these shows because we are backloaded with about 40 interviews to get through. So he may not be recording with me now, but he'll be on this episode. He's going to be on all of them throughout the week. I just thought this week, so much going on with SEC Media Days. We're going to have to do a little slow down and recap what we missed because there was so much going on. What a wild time it was down there. I don't know if anybody delivered as many interviews as we did, short of maybe Paul Finebaum, who's got 50 employees up there working the set and everything like that. So shout out everybody that came on the show, all the support we got all throughout the week. Our live shows were kind of rough. They got better as the week went on. I mean, I think we kind of had it down by the end of the week, not like we would have wanted it to be at the beginning of the week, but a lot of support out there. Really do appreciate it. And shout out everybody that came out Saturday. I don't know if we've said that quite enough, to our Bearded Iris live event. We're going to try to do more of those at some point. We'd love to go around the SEC and really do those tailgates and probably the Fridays before big games, things of that nature. So be on the lookout. We'll definitely talk all about that. But I think we'll save a lot of the stories of SEC Media Days for when Shane's back on the show, which, again, it's not going to be that long. It'll probably be next week. But for anybody that missed it, we did have there were so many highlights from Media Days. Talking to Sam Pittman, talking to KJ, talking to Spencer Rattler, and all the guests we had. But truly, the moment that I think meant the most to Cousin Shane and I was on Thursday. If you missed it, go check out the full interview with Paul Finebaum. But I'm going to play a clip on it. We got Cousin Shane to be on camera. He's scared to death. He wanted no part of joining the set and speaking with Paul on national television. But we got Cousin Shane in the shot anyway. Let's kick it over to this little clip here. Paul Finebaum kind of roasting Cousin Shane.
Michael Bratton, go to town. Michael, it's great to see you. Really been an entertaining week here talking to you, and I got to meet the previous unknown Cousin Shane this week. Cousin Shane is exactly what I thought he was.
I'd love to get him on here, Paul, but he's terrified. He won't step foot on here.
Cousin, could you just walk behind us for a second? I want you right there. I want come on. I want everyone to, because if you know Michael Bratton's That SEC podcast, you know Cousin Shane. Yep. So Cousin, just see if you can get into our shot there, and you can stop about right there. And that is like the star of your podcast.
He's the star. I just show up and put it together, Paul. Without Cousin Shane, there is no show. So I appreciate that. Meant a lot
even though I was with the guy the other night, I still don't know who he is. I mean, what is he?
He's the talent. He's the comedy. He's the icebreaker. He's
funny?
He's the funniest guy I know.
Oh. I guess I caught him on a bad night.
So how great was that? I mean, that. Hopefully we can make this into a meme there. Cousin Shane waving at the camera. I thought that meant the world to us. So for me personally, that was the highlight of the event. So many highlights. But and we're going to get to a couple of these interviews. I was blown away. Probably someone's asked me, biggest takeaway from Media Days was really the presence of Texas and Oklahoma, which some of those guys were there a year ago in Atlanta, but with Texas and Oklahoma official in a year, they'll be in the league. Their presence was strong at Media Days. I was very impressed. All the Texas, Oklahoma content we put out, it's getting devoured. So we're going to dedicate this show, a lot of it, to Texas and Oklahoma. The interviews we got with the people covering Texas, covering Oklahoma that we got at Media Days. But before we get to that, we got to recap this media poll. I mean, I don't get too up in arms about it. A lot of people were mad. Vanderbilt got so many votes. Let's start with the East then. Georgia, runaway winner to win the East as expected. 265 votes the Bulldogs got to win the East. No surprise. Tennessee, second in the East in the media poll. They only got 14 votes to win the SEC East. So that gives you an idea. 265 to 14. Wide gap there. South Carolina voted third. They got 3 votes. 3 people think the Gamecocks going to win the East. Kentucky finished fourth in the voting. They got 1 vote to win the East. Florida, next, they finished 5th in the voting. Missouri finished 6th in the voting. Florida and Missouri did not receive a single vote to win the East. No surprise there. But here is the surprise. Vanderbilt, so they finished 7th in the voting, yet they got 8 votes to win the East, more than South Carolina, Kentucky, Florida, or Missouri combined. So what's going on here? There's one of 2 things. Trolling, which I don't think it's trolling because these are anonymous ballots. I mean, sure, we can come out here and no, Cousin Shane and I did not vote Vanderbilt to win the East. We both picked Georgia, of course. We've been public about that. But I think what happened here, old people not knowing how to use technology. I mean, that's what this is. For those that don't know about a little behind the scenes, and why would you, but it's all, the voting's done electronically. You could do it on your phone. You could do it via your computer. And I just think that 8 old-timers meant to put Vanderbilt 8th, and they put them first. I don't know how they did that, but that's more conceivable to me than 8 people actually thinking Vanderbilt was going to win the SEC East this year. No major surprises here. South Carolina 3rd. I'm not surprised by that. That's not where I have them, but they were on a heater last year. They bring back Spencer Rattler. Shane Beamer's one of the best coaches in the SEC in his short period. I really do think. I mean, both years he's been there, they've exceeded the over-under win total, and not by like 1 game, but by multiple games. So I get the hype with South Carolina. Florida, I was a little surprised that they finished 5th. I thought they'd be 6th. Kentucky, again, I got Kentucky 3rd, so 4th, not a major surprise. No real surprises there out of the East aside from that. Carolina 3rd, but understandable. Florida 5th. Missouri, not enough. I just don't think people pay attention to Missouri, so they're always going to finish 6th or 7th in this poll, in my opinion. Now for the West, this was a surprise to me. But given that 8 people voted for Vanderbilt to win the East, again, I don't waste any time over what this SEC media poll does because clearly some people don't even know what team they're damn voting for. Alabama voted to win the West, 165 first-place votes. LSU voted second. That's the team I got. They got 117 votes to win the West. So a little bit of a disparity there between Alabama's 165 and LSU's 117, but not nearly as much as Tennessee and Alabama. Tennessee and Georgia in the East there. A&M got 1 vote to win the West. They finished 3rd. Ole Miss 4th. Arkansas 5th with 3 votes to win the West. Again, this is weird. Auburn, they finished 6th in the voting, but 4 votes to win the West. That doesn't make any sense. And Mississippi State voted last with 1 vote to win the West. Surprises out of the West. Again, Alabama, that's a surprise to me. But the rest, no, I got State 7, Auburn 6, Arkansas 5th, Ole Miss 4th. That's exactly how I'm voting it. I just flip-flop Alabama, put them at 3rd, A&M at 2. So, I mean, my ballot, aside from Alabama being 3rd, is very close to what the actual media poll is. And then the SEC champion, of course, was voted to be Georgia. That's how most people had it. 181 people voted for Georgia to win the SEC. 62 people voted Alabama. 31 voted LSU. That's who I voted for. Tennessee and Vanderbilt each got 5. Again, I have no idea who these people are voting Vanderbilt to, not to win the East, to win the entire SEC, 5 of them. Arkansas and Auburn got 2 votes. A&M, Mississippi State, and South Carolina all got one vote to win the conference this fall. No idea what in the hell these people are thinking. I mean, calling it like I see it. But, hey, like I said, let's recap some of these interviews here. Really great stuff. We're going to start with Anwar Richardson over at OrangeBloods. He always delivers. Gives us, a preview of what to expect for Texas coming into the SEC, what he's learning about SEC culture. And don't forget, I know Alabama fans are well aware, week 2, Texas comes into Alabama. It's going to be a huge measuring stick game for the Longhorns, where they reside potentially in the SEC. A little preview of what we can anticipate 8 times next season when Texas playing in the SEC. Cannot wait for that week 2 matchup in Tuscaloosa. Let's kick it over to this interview with Anwar Richardson. Well, speaking of doing it again, this time last year, Anwar, you were on the show for the first time, covering Texas, of course, for OrangeBloods here at SEC Media Days. You keep coming to this event. Texas is not even in the league yet. How fired up, though? Because it seems like every Texas, every Oklahoma thing we post, man, the fans are excited about the SEC.
Absolutely.
What's it like over at OrangeBloods, the anticipation?
Oh, it's high, I mean, like, to your point, I was here last year. I was at the SEC spring meetings. I'm at this one, I was telling you guys before we started on the show, I spent about one day at Big 12 Media Days last week, and I've been out here since Sunday. So I think that tells you all you need to know. There's an anticipation level, from the fan base, and everyone understands like they still got one more year in the Big 12 and all that entails, but it's hard not to look forward. And so the coaches, their responsibility is to focus in on this season. But as reporters, as people who are fans, we don't have to do any of that stuff. We can look at the Big 12, we go to the SEC, like all those kind of things. So for me, it's it was important to make sure they gave everyone kind of a behind the scenes look about things that are being said and talked about as relates to Texas. As next year this thing will happen. You guys will be in Dallas, so you'll be in my neck of the woods next year for SEC Media Days. And so it's been a good experience, a fun experience. Even UT's SID, they're a couple of that people from their department were out here kind of scouting it out and seeing what to expect and kind of getting the lay of the land. So that's kind of been what's happening, the kind of this entire offseason as anticipation builds.
I don't think I'll ever get used to someone saying UT and it not being Tennessee.
Oh, my gosh.
It's going to be hard.
Yeah.
It's going to be hard because, you just heard, Coach Heupel was, asked about that. He said there's only one UT.
There's only one UT.
Well, he's going to learn. When he turns on the SEC network, then they say, and up next, UT, Coach Sark, and what they're doing down there in Austin. He's going to be like, what in the hell just happened?
Yeah. So, obviously, we want to talk a lot of Texas with you, but I'm curious, what have you learned about SEC while you're here? Maybe it could be coach, could be player, could be anything in general. What's maybe the main takeaway you're picking up from all this SEC knowledge you're soaking in?
Well, there's a couple of different things. I think, when, it's funny from the outside when you hear people talk about SEC, it just means more. It sounds cliche, right? And then when you get here, you realize, oh, it does mean more, right? It's kind of like, I've viewed it, I think I've said this before, it's kind of like coming to the SEC, these meetings, it's almost like going into like the VIP of a club. And all of a sudden, you've been on the outside before, and it's been kind of cool. You're just sitting at the bar, and then you come into the VIP lounge, like, wow, we get bottle service here. This person comes out with sparklers, and it's like, and you just like, it's a different difference. It's so much more professional. Everything that's done, like even down to the little things. Like I'll give you a good example. So I was at Big 12 Media Days a couple of weeks ago, and then they had like kind of the breakout sessions. So they would have a coach was sitting here, and then have a player right next to him, and so they would have like a coach with a speaker that was going, and a player who was supposed to be sitting right next to them going at the same time. So you couldn't hear. Right. It was like chaos that was going on at one time. And, and here you can just see, okay, coach is on the stage and like how professionally it's done. And, the players in different spots and like the breakout there, you can see that how they treat the media. I think yesterday something happened I've never seen done. I saw four coaches go to the stage and thank the media for covering them.
Yeah.
When does that happen? Like, well, you never, I don't live in a world where people thank the media for doing anything. And yet you sort of appreciation, you sort saw kind of a working relationship between the SEC and how the media is. I learned that there's a high level of respect for the University of Texas. I don't think that anyone looks at him and says, "Oh my gosh, this is the savior of the league." But I think they feel that there's a respect level that Texas is going to bring some brand recognition, some name brand stuff, and hopefully a good quality of football. That's to come. But people respect Coach Sarkisian. Lane Kiffin talked about him and their relationship that they have. Clearly, Nick Saban has a long relationship with him as well. So there's a respect level there. So I feel like overall, what I've learned from the SEC is that I feel like they're welcoming. Of Texas. I feel like they're welcoming the media members. And they're welcoming of having, kind of, I guess I say, moving into this new direction, of this kind of big, bad super conference that's going to happen, and it's going to be basically the SEC, and it's just going to be everybody else.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, we're talking about most anticipated games coming up this season. One of the ones at the top of the list has got to be Texas and Alabama. We got a hell of a game last year, and honestly, you felt like you guys missed an opportunity there. What's kind of the fan interact, because we're new to Longhorn Nation here. So what is kind of the anticipation on their side coming into this game?
I think there's anticipation that from the Texas fans that it's kind of, first I'll start with, let's say it like this, it's unfinished business. It's kind of like that Alabama Texas game is almost like Rocky 1. Right? Where all of a sudden, it's like Apollo Creed, he won, but Rocky, and the fans felt like, man, Rocky could have won that fight, and then you have to have the rematch. And that's what I feel like there too is like Rocky 2 is like, it's the rematch, and it's like Apollo Creed, he can't feel like, man, I can't feel really good. And Bama can't feel really good because they got to say to themselves, well, Quinn Ewers got hurt, Hudson Card, the backup, he got hurt, right? And so all of a sudden, they say to yourself, they got the victory. But Texas fans were saying, man, but you know what? We feel like we could have really won that thing. And so, I think going in there, as Sarkisian has kind of been building this program, one of the things – and I think I've said this on the show, but it's worth repeating. That one of the things that Sark has really learned, he learned it from that Arkansas game a couple of years ago when they got their butts kicked. He understood that they weren't ready to compete in the SEC. Like, they just didn't have a team that would be able to compete week in and week out. And the biggest thing that they noticed was that in the trenches, they didn't have the guys. They didn't have the guys on the offensive line. They didn't have the guys on the defensive line. And remember that Arkansas game, that defensive line was just battering. They were rushing three and getting to the quarterback at will. And so they were able to kind of strengthen the offensive line. They had a great, probably would have viewed as one of the great offensive line recruiting classes in school history just a couple of years ago. They'll go into Tuscaloosa with a left tackle by the name of Kelvin Banks. Just write this down, Kelvin Banks. He started as a freshman last season in every single game. He locked down everybody. He's viewed as a guy that by next year will be a first-round draft pick at left tackle. They've got a lot of good veteran offensive linemen, so they feel really good about what they have up front. They feel really good about what they're going to have on the defensive side of the ball. But the real thing for them is going to be at the skill positions. They're going to be really good. Okay, so because they've got Quinn Ewers, so they've got him coming back for another year, and all the belief is that he's going to be a better quarterback than he was last year. And you look, and Texas enters this game probably with a better quarterback room than Alabama does, because Alabama's a little bit unsettled at that position. They're still trying to figure out who it is. Nick Saban was here saying that, he's still got to let this thing play out over the next month before he goes and finally decides who he's going to be with. Texas doesn't have that problem. They've got Quinn Ewers. On the receiver side, they've got Xavier Worthy, who was, of course, a preseason Big 12 guy, but he's viewed as a first-round draft pick. On the other side, they got a Georgia transfer by the name of A.D. Mitchell. And A.D., when he was healthy, was very good, very effective, was kind of a touchdown machine for Georgia in his limited reps, but he's going to be a starter there. They've got Jatavian Sanders, as a tight end, who's viewed as the number 2 tight end in the country. He's viewed as another high draft pick, so you're looking at those skill positions. And then they had a guy by the name of Isaiah Nayer player who got injured last season, but what was one of the top receivers in the transfer market, but he got hurt right before the season, got an ACL. He's back, but as well. So I'm talking about from a firepower standpoint, they're going to have a lot. Now, the key the hard part for them is from a running back perspective, it's going to be hard to replace a Bijan Robinson.
Right.
That guy gets drafted in the first round by the Atlanta Falcons for a reason, right? And then their backup running back by the name of Roschon Johnson, he got drafted in the 4th round. So you're replacing 2 guys, and that's how good that backfield was when your backup gets drafted in the 4th round. So they've got some guys that are trying to work in there, but they feel like they've got the quarterback. They feel like they're really good at the receiver. They feel like they're really good up front, and they feel like when they go into Tuscaloosa that they're actually going to be. They feel like it'll be more than competitive, And I don't think Sark's going to be worried about that. He's not going to be afraid about that. He's going to have those guys know this is what the environment is. This is what to expect. But I think from Texas fans, going back to what you're saying, they feel really good about this. And by the way, Texas is favored to win 11 out of 12 games this year. So the fan base is really, really good. The only game they're not favored to win is Alabama. But of course, they have optimism there.
So how many touchdowns do they win by?
Nick
Saban left yesterday.
Man, I don't know. I just play fantasy. That's easier.
Yeah. Well, you hit on something important there, the quarterback room. For Texas, a strength. Alabama, I don't want to call it a weakness, even though I kind of think it is. But it's more of a question. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a credit to Steve Sarkisian, obviously.
Yeah.
Because when he was at Bama, that was the strongest part of Alabama's roster, too. Now that's at Texas. So will this be a measuring stick game, you think, for Texas? I mean, because they're saying all the right things. They're trying to win the Big 12 the final year they're there. But what will that say, even if they don't win? I know Texas fans are optimistic they can beat Alabama, but let's say they take them to the wire in Tuscaloosa. That's how Alabama's only lost 2 home games in the last 10 years. So it's very unlikely anybody goes down there and wins a game.
Sure.
But not getting run out of the building like you did at Arkansas, getting ready for SEC play, I have to imagine the fan base is viewing this as a measuring stick to see how far Sark has taken this program and how far or what to expect when they do make that jump to the SEC.
Yeah, I think you make a good point. So what's interesting about Texas versus the SEC over the last several years, Texas actually has been okay and been pretty competitive in those games. They played a bowl game against Missouri. I want to say that was in 2017, and Texas won that one. They played against Georgia, of course, in the Sugar Bowl, and Texas ended up winning that one, and that was because I guess Georgia decided they didn't want to be there because they didn't get into the city.
I wanted to give you a heads up real quick. In the SEC, when we lose a bowl game, we didn't want to be there. So
okay, so we heard
that line. Remember that line.
Yes, there was Texas plays against LSU at home. They end up losing by a touchdown, and what a great game! And what no one knew at the time was going to be one of the greatest football teams in college football history. That 15-0 team, but Texas, that was a competitive game that they should have won. Like you said, they get their butt stomped against Arkansas, and that happened. Then they're competitive against Alabama. So there's this belief amongst the Texas fan base that they're not that far off. They're not this team that's going to go in there and say, they're going to get their butts beat because they've been very competitive and they've won some of these games. So tell me your question again, because I started going off a little bit of a tangent in my head.
How the fan base is viewing that Alabama matchup as a measuring stick for
so
Texas
when it comes
ready.
to so that's the measuring stick. I think it'll be a little bit of a measuring stick for sure, and it's going to be a big game. Everyone's going to be, watching it, and so sure, I think going into the day, they understand what that looks like. I think the disappointment will be if they get run out the building. If there's this buildup of all this and they just get run out the building, then all of a sudden Texas fans are going to say to themselves, okay, I don't know what the heck happened. That's a Santa Claus isn't real thing. But if they're competitive for 4 quarters and, if by some chance they lose at that, by 3 points or 7 points or something like that, I think Texas fans will be say to themselves, okay, they're okay. Now, no Texas fan wants me to talk about them losing the game because optimistically they all feel like they're going to win. But realistically, I think they'll take that as a small quote-unquote victory. But I am telling you, the Texas fan base feels like they have a shot. They go into that thing knowing it's going to be tough. But if a couple of things go their way, they feel like it can happen.
And if they do, could you imagine?
Oh,
I mean,
goodness.
I would imagine Texas thinks they're going to win the first 3 SEC championships coming in.
I'm sure. That reality will kick in.
I
at some point.
saw Oklahoma, not to bring those guys up, but I saw them bring up that stat. What is it, 50 championships in the last 100 years, conference championships. So I don't know. It is going to be a little bit different over here. But I do want to ask you, because every time you come on, it's about 98% Texas A&M chiming in, telling them these boys ain't ready. When you got to see the schedule come out, obviously we don't know exactly when this is going to be played. How excited were you to see that Texas A&M match kicking off again?
Well, Texas A&M should know what not being ready looks like. So if they go and tell you that someone's not ready, then A&M would know. I mean, that was 5-7 last season, so they should know what not being ready looks like. I would listen to everything that they're saying. But you asked about the rivalry, right? It's a rivalry that needed to be, restored. The pettiness between both of the schools was probably to the detriment of college football.
Yeah.
Those teams need to play each other. You can't imagine just not having Alabama versus Auburn, to a certain degree. Yeah. If you look at like Florida and not, Florida State, like just imagine that saying, well, you're in a different conference, so we're not going to play each other. Like, no, you make those rivalry games happen no matter what. So, it's funny, like each program acted like they didn't need each other going forward. Like Texas A&M said, we got the SEC, we don't need you. And Texas is like, well, you guys left, so you know what, screw you. We don't need you either. But at the end of the day, they both needed each other.
Yeah.
Like they'd lie to each other, because here's the thing. Now that it's official, and especially when Texas started going to SEC, now the trash talk between them has heated up. Now everyone, I got A&M fans all in my mentions, and I know they'll be back today. They got mad at me for tweeting out something about their guys wearing sunglasses, indoors, and then, it was barrage. So that it's a rivalry that needs to happen. It's cool that it happened. Obviously, back let them go to Texas A&M, because God forbid if the first game had been in Austin, they would have cried and complained about that. Right, the same way they cried and complained because they didn't want Texas to come to the SEC. So they can say, they're going to say everything, but this is rivalry football, and this is what it's about. That's that heated thing that goes back and forth. And Texas, of course, has Oklahoma, as a rival, and that's a big one, for them, and that's a historic one as well. But as you know, the in-state rivalry games, there's nothing like them.
I'm glad he went there, because that's exactly what I wanted to ask you. I have to assume Oklahoma is the chief rival, because they don't play A&M anymore, but they soon will. How quickly do you think A&M could be the biggest rival for Texas, or do you think it will just always remain Oklahoma?
Well, I think it will depend on what they do. If they stay with the 8-game schedule, after 2024, and then it just rotates, then no, it's not going to be a rivalry, because
I don't think they will, though, from what I'm hearing.
Well, if they don't, then that'll be great, right? Yeah. Because if they go to the 9, that's what you're hearing 9 games. If they go to the 9, then all of a sudden, that it's going to be close. It's going to be close, because when I talk to different people in the fan base, there's more A&M fans that you'll see inside the state of Texas than you will necessarily see Oklahoma fans. So, I can see Aggie stuff all throughout in different neighborhoods and things to that effect. So, I think both of them will be big. But if this game is starting to be played on Thanksgiving Day, kind of like it used to be back in the day, the thing is, like, Texas A&M. I mean, Texas fans have been talking about that Justin Tucker victory for years. Like more so than anything else. And so that's going to be interesting. And the other thing that's going to make this rivalry really interesting is that a couple of things from a recruiting battle staying like over the last few years. If you lost a battle and a kid went to Texas, well, if you were at Texas A&M, it never really mattered because you didn't play against them. Yeah. And vice versa. If you lost a kid to A&M, it didn't matter because you didn't play against them. Now, all of a sudden, it's going to matter because you're going to be able to see that kid. So that hurts you. That helps and hurts as far as recruiting is concerned. But then it puts the pressure. And I feel like the pressure ends up, especially from a recruiting standpoint and a rivalry standpoint, the pressure gets on a guy like Jimbo Fisher. Because God forbid Texas comes in this conference next season and has more success than Texas A&M.
Absolutely.
Like that, all of a sudden, that rivalry thing heats up a lot, because you can't have that. You can't have Sark come in and they win 10 games and A&M's at 7 or 8 or whatever that case may be. So it's going to ratchet up pretty quickly.
Yeah.
All right, last thing for you, Anwar. I really appreciate your time.
Of course.
So much buzz about Arch Manning, and I realize in Austin they don't. If he's the starting quarterback, we had someone else on. They said, well, disaster has struck. If he's so I'm not asking that, but a lot of people we hear from, they say, well, if his name was Arch Smith, he wouldn't have been the number 1 overall pick or prospect. Excuse me.
Sure.
So, what's the early read on him? I know it's early, but do you think what's the buzz? Is he living up to the hype, so to speak, at least early on? And can he be the future of the program?
Can he be the future of the program? Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
I guess that was kind of a double answer, right? But he's not there yet. Okay, so he's a third-string guy under, Malik Murphy, who Malik Murphy had a really good spring. And Arch, he entered in with a lot of high expectations. Not to say that he won't be there, but right now he's still a guy who's learning, a guy that, played at a smaller school in Louisiana, who's playing on major college football, and is going to have to learn. And while he may have the last name and he has the pedigree and all those kind of things, and he has all the resources, the best resources in the world to improve, I think you look at that and you say to yourself, yeah, he can do that. But right now, if something happens right now, Malik Murphy, he comes in and he's the backup quarterback for now. Arch, basically, what he has to do is kind of learn and grow and improve and be ready to battle for the position in 2024. The plan is for Quinn Ewers to have a good season. That's what everyone hopes for. When I say everyone, I mean the staff. Right. And then he goes pro. Yeah. And then those two kind of battle it out next year. But the things that I hear is that no one's willing to say that this is Arch's job in 2024. It's just a matter of time. They tell me he's going to have to earn it, because they're really high on Malik Murphy. And by the way, do yourself a favor and just research. I don't know if you guys saw that viral picture of their quarterback room, but just go ahead and look up Malik Murphy. He's got 2 A's in his first name, and look at his physique, and look how he's like 6'7". He looks to be about 240-ish or something like that. They did a picture of all the quarterbacks together at this spring, just about sometime in June. I mean, he looks like he's trying out for a Fast and Furious movie. Like, whatever you think Jalen Monroe looks like, he's the guy that picks up Jalen and throws him off the balcony, right? So, but he's also a good quarterback, and he came with a high pedigree, highly recruited out of California. Steve Sarkisian is a California-ish kind of guy, so, he's able to pluck that guy out there. So there'll be a battle that'll happen in 2024. So for me, lower the expectations on Arch and then see what he does next season.
All right, before you go, Anwar, can you tell the audience where can they find you?
Oh, it's real simple. It's you can find me on Twitter. It's real simple. Anwar Richardson. It's ANWAR Richardson. Go ahead and send me all your hate tweets, and of course, I work for OrangeBloods.com. But Anwar Richardson. Don't make me block you. No, I just mute them and then just let them keep talking to themselves. It's kind of fun.
Yeah, no doubt. Thank you
again.
so much.
All right, so some great stuff from Anwar. Really appreciate him joining the show. Now we got, for the first time, Eddie Radosevich from Sooners Scoop. A lot of Oklahoma people reached out to us and said, hey, Eddie's going to be at SEC Media Days. This needs to be your Oklahoma guy. And Eddie delivered. Some good stuff here. Talking to Oklahoma, coming to the SEC, expectations year 2 for Brent Venables. And we just had to ask him. We had to. For all them Vols out there, what's with all this Josh Heupel to Oklahoma? Could that ever happen? I mean, according to Eddie, no shot in hell that ever happens, because the relationship is the same thing I've been telling Tennessee fans. The relationship between Josh Heupel and Oklahoma is, it's non-existent. So, in Eddie's own words, if Oklahoma job opened up, Josh Heupel would take himself out of consideration. He wants no part of going back to Norman. At least that's the way Eddie tells it, as well as his thoughts on joining the SEC. Let's kick it over to Eddie Radosevich from Sooner Scoop. Really fun interview.
We appreciate you, Eddie.
Absolutely.
One more time. I'm sorry. Say your name. We're a little slower in the South. Welcome to the SEC.
Thank you. Eddie Radosevich.
Radosevich from Sooner Scoop on 3.
Yes, sir.
Really appreciate you.
Yeah.
And I was joking. It's not a joke. It's true. Sooner fans said, hey, we need some Oklahoma coverage on the show. Get Eddie on the show. So
I'll try.
We appreciate you stopping by, man.
Absolutely.
How's the SEC treating you so far?
Pretty good. It still feels weird. I think that it really doesn't feel like it's real just because there is still another season to be played in the Big 12. But, I think that you talk to any Oklahoma fan, they feel like the passion, the fervor for college football is at an all-time high, obviously, in Oklahoma, and it kind of matches up with the fan bases of the SEC. So there's a lot of excitement, and obviously there's a lot of questions for Oklahoma as they go into the second year of Brent Venables.
Well, they did unveil, 2024 people that were going to be playing. I mean,
absolutely.
What was a common reaction from Oklahoma fans? Because I thought brutal at first. They didn't go easy on you.
Yeah, no, I think there was like a, wow, this is cool. Alabama's coming to Norman. Oh, God, they're going to LSU, and they're going to Oxford, and they're going to Auburn. It's obviously a tough schedule, and I think that, entering what is a pivotal year for Brent Venables in year number 2, that they got to be able to build some type of momentum going into the season, going into 2024, and everything that's going to come with the SEC, because it is a step up. I think that's probably one of the biggest things that has come across to me here is just the fact that you start talking about, obviously in the West, for instance, Alabama and LSU are obviously very, very good, and then you have 3 through 7 that are all really, really good football teams. And there is, I hate to just throw shots at people, but there is no Kansas, even though they took a step in Lance Leipold's first year. So it's going to be kind of exciting, but I think there's a lot of people that are, cautiously optimistic about how this whole thing's going to go.
Yeah. Now, be honest here. In this conference, everyone's pissed off at Georgia right now.
Sure.
Because they don't have to play that Oklahoma game.
Sure.
And it made the schedule weak as hell. It was already kind of weak, but now it's weak as hell.
Yeah.
Oklahoma people, they're probably thankful as they can. They don't have to play that damn juggernaut in Athens, right?
There is definitely a sigh of relief, although it would have been really, really cool to see those two teams on the field. And just, with the game that they last played out in the Rose Bowl, that was awesome.
Yeah. Wasn't that the first meeting of the two?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the first time they had ever played, which is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I mean, I think that for Oklahoma and how big this year is for them, getting Georgia off the schedule and even replacing them with an SMU, which should be better. It'll be a good non-conference game for them. It worked out in Oklahoma's favor that they don't have to play that game this year. No doubt about it.
Yeah.
Well, when you guys do come over, are you bringing Venables with you?
Yeah, I think that'll be the plan.
We're going to talk hot seat
every
year.
We're putting him on the hot seat before he comes over here.
Well, you talk to enough Oklahoma fans around Oklahoma City or down in Norman, and it was a year that people just weren't used to, going 6-7. The way that they lost games in the fourth quarter, the 5 of the 7 losses were one-score games. 4 of the last 5 games they lost on the last possession of the game. So I think that was and it was small things too. It was a penalty, or it was a game mismanagement, or not being able to move the ball in the fourth quarter or get off the field in the fourth quarter without giving up a touchdown.
Yeah.
I think that was the biggest thing, and that was one of the things that I think a lot of people, when Brent took over, was all the small things are going to be taken care of. Well, they weren't in year 1,
right.
And I think that pissed a lot of people off. And they obviously are going to have to go through a little bit of a turnover from Lincoln to Brent, and there were some depth issues that Oklahoma had. But they've kind of started to, I think, answer those questions. Now it's about going out there and actually doing it 12 Saturdays of fall.
Well, aside from Oklahoma fans, I'll tell you who's most rooting for Brent Venables and company, and that's Tennessee fans. We're Tennessee homers.
Okay.
We were supposed to be objective, but
sure.
We tell the truth. We were Tennessee guys. Can you shed some light for our Tennessee fans on the relationship Josh Heupel and Oklahoma? Because I know it's icy.
Yeah.
And
which is sad.
Right. But, I mean, would he even be a candidate? And it sounds like he wouldn't be, but you would know a lot better than
I think Josh would take himself out of being a candidate, just because I think that even, in everything that's going into tomorrow when Josh is here, it doesn't sound like he's going to answer any Oklahoma questions. I know that he's been kind of outspoken on not talking about it. Just the way that ended in 2014, it was awkward. And, I mean, Bob Stoops to this day will say that he didn't fire him. He got fired. He got fired because the offense had kind of stalled in 13 and stalled in 14. And, it was rough to watch, and especially for somebody that grew up in Oklahoma that in 99, 2000, Josh Heupel was a god over there, and he still is to a lot of people. But because of the way that went down and the bridge that was burned, and it seems like it's never going to be rebuilt, it's kind of sad. You would hope that at some point, and they brought back the 2000 team not too long ago to celebrate the national championship, and he wasn't a part of it. And I think that is kind of sad, just in the fact that he was such a big player in that, obviously, and it's just it's been awkward the way that whole thing is kind of boiled down. But I think at the same time, and I'd love to hear what Josh would say to this, and hopefully he'll talk about it tomorrow. It's like he needed that. I think he needed to get out of there and kind of reinvent himself, look in the mirror, do some things differently. And it's obviously turned out really well for him. I know that, I would imagine that you guys are pretty happy with what he's done in Knoxville. It's been a lot of fun to watch. And, Joey Hosley, the offense coordinator out there, isn't he the offense coordinator? Did he just get promoted? Quarterbacks coach?
Yeah, he is now. He was quarterbacks coach. Now he's OC.
Awesome. Like, I was in school with Joey at the same time. Had friends on the football team, and I couldn't be more happy for the success that a bunch of those guys have had with that kind of that umbrella that Josh had in Norman and kind of took with him.
Well, I can teach you a new term real quick. Battered Vol syndrome. And that is, we're always looking for the dark clouds are coming. And that's where that comes from. So.
Sure. Oklahoma fans aren't used to that. And I think that's what they were so, petrified of a year ago was, the one thing that everybody, and probably Oklahoma fans are most familiar with is, are they becoming the next Nebraska?
Yeah. Right.
Are they going to make this conference change? And then are they going to end up how Nebraska's ended up in the Big Ten? And, I guess we'll see. They have a lot of more probably pieces in place than Nebraska had, though.
One of the games that me and Mike are really looking forward to is Texas, Oklahoma. This is a rivalry we did not really appreciate until late.
Sure.
But we've talked to a lot of Texas guys. We've talked to a lot of Texas A&M guys. Billy says, and I don't want to quote him here, but I'm going to quote him, that you think Alabama's wild.
Yeah.
You wait till you see the toxic fans coming from Texas. So can you tell our listeners why we're not going to like the Texas fans?
There's a sense of arrogance that's always been a part of the Texas football program, but you kind of appreciate that. I think Billy would probably call them SIPs. That's probably the best way to say it. It's a love-hate relationship. I got a bunch of buddies that went to Texas, so the OU Texas experience down at the State Fair at the Cotton Bowl, first weekend of October, though, it's truly one of the – if you love college football, if you love the pageantry of it, go get down there. The game, it's kind of become an 11 a.m. staple now. You got to get down there at 7:30 in the morning, have a wax cup beer, and watch the pageantry that is. Everybody comes. They take the buses through the middle of the fair. It's unbelievable.
Do the fair? I'm trying to. So is the fair all week or?
Yeah, the fair runs for 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks, I think, in Dallas. And you start seeing it that time of the year, end of September, beginning of October. You start seeing buddies that live in Dallas taking their kids and stuff out there and grabbing all those coupons that you can get in anticipation of OU Texas. So it's truly, there's nothing like it.
Right.
I hope it stays at the Cotton Bowl forever at the State Fair Park, even though it's not the nicest stadium in the entire world.
Yeah.
There truly is no, maybe Army, Navy, something like that. From a neutral standpoint, if you're just a college football fan, you got to go. It's awesome.
Yeah. And we've all had our list come out when this expansion's coming out. Is there any Oklahoma games you're really looking forward to?
I've never been to the Grove,
so
I think that's probably number one, just to see it.
Yeah.
Won't get to participate a whole lot in it, but because we'll be covering the games. But the Grove is up there. Between the Hedges would be really cool just to go. I think the Swamp will be cool.
Yeah.
And for that matter, I think even a place like Vanderbilt. I mean, not maybe necessarily the stadium, but getting to new places, going to Nashville, being able to do that kind of stuff. It's just it's different than anything that we've been a part of over the last 10 years since I've been covering Oklahoma. So, I found myself having a little bit of a soft spot for Morgantown.
Yeah.
It's just unique. It's way out there. It's kind of off the beaten Big 12 track, if you will. But I think everybody's pretty excited for the SEC.
Cool. Well, when the SEC adds them,
and I would say Knoxville, but I've been there. So I don't want to make anybody too mad.
So how bad do you hate Heupel?
And that's the thing. Is I grew up. I was in 8th grade when they won the national championship. Would have died for that team.
Yeah.
That was that was the peak of college football fandom for me. Watching those guys and how downtrodden the program was in the mid '90s growing up. My parents were season ticket holders, went to all the games, and it's kind of crazy, and I think Oklahoma fans are a little spoiled as well. I mean, it is what it is, especially 17, 18, 19 offensively.
From our vantage point, it seemed like the reaction, though, from Oklahoma fans was a little mixed.
Yeah.
I think because they dominated the Big 12.
Sure.
The path to the playoff is a lot clearer in that conference.
Yeah.
Have they mostly come around to joining the SEC? Where's that at?
I think so. I think that the majority of the fan base is ready to make the move. I think they're excited about making the move, but you're going to have people that want to stay in the Big 12, and you can win it every year. And I think it's more of a comfort thing. You know what you're getting, and that's kind of like what we were talking about earlier, as far as you got to know everything about Kentucky. You got to know everything about whoever is the down team. Not to say Kentucky is by any means, but you don't have that Kansas. You don't have that kind of breather that you maybe get with an Iowa State. And I think that is kind of the heightened alert type situation for Oklahoma fans. And, they're going to just have to get used to it because there's no turning back now.
When you started hearing the rumors, because when I started hearing the rumors, Texas and Oklahoma maybe join the SEC, I said, there's no way in hell. There's no way in hell that's going to happen. Do you remember some of those early conversations and it just kind of spiraling into this next chapter?
Sure. I think it kind of went from a stage of I don't want to hear about it. The conference expansion stuff, it kind of reached a height where it was like, God, not this again. It's June. There's nothing to talk about. Obviously, we're going to have to talk about it. But then you started hearing some stuff, and it kind of built a little bit of excitement. It was like, I don't want to get my hopes up. And then obviously with the Brent Zwerneman story that came out, it was like, it was also one of those like scrolling through Twitter like, is this real? And then you start checking, and it's like, yeah, this looks very, very real. Yeah. So it was. It almost seems like it's been 5 years ago now. Even though it's only been a couple years, and I think that the plan that's in place for Oklahoma and Brent's vision of what he wants the program to be. They had to build out of what that was, what Lincoln left, and not to say that he left a terrible program by any means, but depth-wise, they didn't have what you need defensively, and I think through the transfer portal this year, they've been able to go get some guys that could come in and contribute from day one.
Well, I'm just looking forward to all this newness like you're talking about, but we'll be getting Oklahoma and Arkansas, Mizzou again, LSU. I mean, I think those rivalries will form fairly quickly. And we're optimistic, guys. The way we've been selling this new SEC, I think every player in the transfer portal and the elite prospects, hell, they already all want to come to the SEC. With Texas and Oklahoma coming, I mean, I don't think those schools will ever lose a recruiting battle to anyone in the Pac-12, Big Ten, none of that. So I think it's rising water will elevates all the programs, and I think they will with the Sooners as well.
And I think that like even with coming off the 6th and 7th season a year ago, for Oklahoma to finish with a top 5 recruiting class and still go out and be able to get some guys in the transfer portal, I think kind of proves that people do obviously want to go play in the SEC. It's really strange even still now talking to high school kids that are going in to their senior seasons and they're committing to Oklahoma and they're going to play in the SEC. That's all they'll know is the SEC. They won't know anything about the Big 12. So, I think it's going to inflate everything. Obviously, wins and losses are going to be all that matters at the end of the day for Brent and, kind of that regime and how everything's going down. But, it's going to be a lot of fun. And I think that just being around stuff like this even for the media side of things, it's like, okay, this is getting pretty real.
Well, and they announced media going to be down there in Dallas, which ironically is where the Big 12's been meeting, just down the street there at the Omni Hotel. So I would imagine a huge blowout next year for the SEC, getting you guys back in the league. We're pumped up I don't want to cut it short here, Mike, but where can we follow you if you're looking for Oklahoma news?
Soonerscoop.com on 3. We just made the move over there a couple months ago, and it's been unbelievable to kind of be with like-minded people that all we do is cover college football. And, obviously a little college basketball here and there with Porter Moser and baseball and softball, obviously. But, I'm excited about those other sports getting to the SEC. And, obviously football is going to be anything that we want to talk about and everything that everybody wants to talk about in Norman. But those smaller sports, the minor sports, are going to be fun too.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, man.
Absolutely. Anytime, guys.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
All right, Eddie, so just want to say thanks again for joining the show, bringing some Sooner knowledge. We were going to have to bring him on as the season gets here, and we're going to be monitoring Texas and Oklahoma all season long before they join the SEC. Cannot wait for that, to learn some. I've got very little knowledge on Texas and Oklahoma. I tell it like it is, but I'm going to start learning this fall, gearing up for them to join the SEC. So that's going to be a lot of fun. And hey, we ain't done yet. One more. Joe Cook from Inside Texas. Really good stuff from Joe. I had never met Joe. He came over our table and said, "Hey, I'm Joe Cook, Inside Texas. You ever need a Texas insider, hit me up." And I said, "How about right now?" So he sat down. We did this interview, spur of the moment, moments after meeting him. Really great stuff. The expectations, I mean, the way he tells it, could be a playoff team if they could beat Alabama. I think that's fair. We talked some Arch Manning and lots of other things with Joe Cook from Inside Texas. Really appreciate getting to meet Joe and having him on the show. He'll be back to, let's kick it over to him.
We're not your normal SEC show. I'm sure you've already figured that out.
Yeah.
All right, pleased to be joined by Joe Cook, Inside Texas. Just met you, and we're welcoming you to the SEC. I know it's a year early, but hey, there's the Alabama game we're all excited about. So how's the SEC treating you so far?
It's been great. I really look forward to this trip and knew that there'd be a lot of intrigue. I know it's a big year for the league, but I think this is, having Texas presence here and having Texas at even spring meetings kind of is a first sign for a lot of people that this is real. This is less than 365 days away. And especially that Alabama game. That'll be a real first real sign of Texas traveling into SEC territory and starting to become a real member of the league.
One of the things we talked about is hopefully we don't lose this season, because everybody's talking about next year and what the playoffs going to look like, Texas and Oklahoma coming in. What is Texas? I mean, what is that mentality right now? Like, hey, we got one more and then we're going over. Or are we not even focused? We're just dialed in to Big 12 play.
So if you remember that June day where they released the opponents for 2024, all the Texas players and Steve Sarkisian tweeted out the 2023 schedule.
Yeah.
And they're showing that they're trying to keep their focus on the 2023 schedule. And Steve Sarkisian's been speaking in April and May, even the past couple weeks at Big 12 Media Days and other events, to where, that's exciting. It's fun that we're going to be there. But Texas is in the Big 12 in 2023, and their goal is to leave the Big 12 as champions like they entered as champions in 96. It's to leave as champions like they left the Southwest Conference as champions in 95. They're building the program, I think, in a way that tries to set them up well for a future in the SEC, but they're trying to win the Big 12 before because that's the league they're members of right now.
How big is that Week 2 game, though, at Alabama? I mean, they should have beat Alabama last year, in my opinion, and we thought Texas was going to get their ass kicked. I'll just tell you, we thought there no
Vegas
shot,
did too.
No shot against Alabama, and like I said, they should have beat them. How big of a measuring stick, or is it, do you think, for Steve Sarkisian and his program Week 2 going? Because it is at Alabama. I mean, they'll be a huge underdog again, but that doesn't mean there's a lot of doubt on Alabama too. So how much of a measuring stick is that game, do you think?
It definitely is one. It's the strongest. It's easily the strongest team on their schedule because their non-conference this year is Rice and then Wyoming, and those are two teams that are at various stages of the group of five. The next best team on their schedule may be Oklahoma, or it could be Kansas State. So they're going to know right away whether all their preparations and all their expectations are going to be how attainable, I guess, they're going to be. Yeah. Luckily for Texas, last year, that game didn't count towards conference play. Luckily for them this year, it didn't count towards conference play, so if they can't leave Bryant-Denny with the win, they'll know, and they would prefer to leave with the win, obviously. But it is a good way to measure up how they feel they're going to be able to operate in the SEC, because it's going to include a lot of linemen that Steve Sarkisian and Kyle Flood recruited. Very different than the way Tom Herman recruited linemen. Gets a lot more bigger-bodied guys. It's got to test a defensive front that returns a lot of players, but doesn't have outstanding edge rushers. And it's going to be a big test for Quinn Ewers, because he doesn't have the crutch of Bijan Robinson and Roschon Johnson to lean on like he did last year. He's going to have to do his fair share, a little bit more than he did last year leading the offense. So, and there's no better secondary to test that out against in Alabama this upcoming year. So it should be a real big way to see if they're ready, but at the same time, it's not going to be a be-all, end-all for what their 2023 looks like.
Hey, we got a lot of Aggie followers. How bad do you want to kick their ass?
There are so many people who are glad that game is back, because the best way I can think about describing it is, let's say you live in Mobile, and okay, it's Thanksgiving, you got the turkey out, you cook, you go to bed, you wake up, and you're watching the Iron Bowl. Yeah. You can set your calendar to it every single year, and for the past 10 years, you haven't been able to do that. I know Texas A&M's tried to replicate that with LSU, and there's been some pretty impressive games, but that is one-sided. Yeah. LSU, from my perspective, doesn't view Texas A&M the same way that Texas A&M views LSU. And for as many people want to say, oh, we don't care, oh, let them go, oh, let them be, we're better. No, this game is so it's perfect that it's back. It needed to happen. It needed to be a conference game. It didn't need to be a low-level bowl or anything like that. It needed to be a conference game. And I think if you ask a lot of Texas fans, they don't mind the fact that the first one's in College Station. They're just glad that it's back. They didn't clamor for anything. And, hey, Ross Bjork did, and he got his way, and good for him. But
they're already talking.
But there are so many people that are glad it's back. They don't care whether it's they would prefer for it to be on Thanksgiving or the day after Thanksgiving. I think that's where it should be. And it's that level of rivalry for the people in Texas, just because it's been around so long. It's been, neighbor versus neighbor, all those different qualifications that you haven't been able to have the bragging rights about in 10 years. And they've played baseball, they've played basketball, they've played other sports, but there's only one place where it really matters, and that's on the football field.
Well, obviously that Texas A&M game, that's the one Texas fans are looking forward to the most in conference. But aside from that, who is that second team you think? Is it an Arkansas? Is it Bama? Is it maybe even Georgia or Tennessee? Who do Texas fans are they most looking forward to playing in the SEC?
Obviously, Texas has a long history with Arkansas, Southwest Conference days, game of the century with President Nixon there, all those different matchups that they've had over the years. I think Frank Broyles and Darrell Royal retired on the same day, so there's history there. But I think there's just a lot of intrigue for Texas fans, not on one particular team. Of course, having Georgia in Austin in 2024 is going to be a really fun game, and one that's going to bring, I know Dog Nation travels, but Texas doesn't sell its tickets pretty easy to opposing fans. But I think there's just intrigue about being able to go to places like Oxford. Texas went in, I think, 2012. Played and won a game there. They haven't been to Starkville since, I think, the late 90s. I don't think they've ever been to Knoxville, and they haven't been to Gainesville since World War II. So there's so many different places that Texas either hasn't been in a long time or has never really been, that's what's got them interested. Arkansas is going to be a fun matchup. That's still going to be a rivalry. It continues to be. But I think just the idea of being able to go to so many new places and see, why the SEC has a network, why there's that SEC podcast, all these different things. That's what has Texas fans really excited. And, the athletic department's pretty happy about a nice windfall that'll be coming its way down the road as well.
How big is this year for Sark? And I realize you don't cover A&M, but also for Jimbo. Like a year ago, if I would have asked you who's more likely to win an SEC title first, Texas or A&M, I think everybody would have said A&M. I'm asking SEC people now, a lot of them are saying Texas because of the momentum, but that can flip quickly. If they don't win the Big 12, if they stub their toe, if A&M has a big year, how big is this for Sarkisian and company with a season to come before going to the SEC?
It's a really big one. I mean, you look at both A&M, you look at Texas, they're at very crucial junctures in the direction of both their programs. Of course, Steve Sarkisian's about to enter year 3, had a very dismal year 1, and year 1s are always difficult, and improved in year 2. Jimbo Fisher had a 5-7 season in his 5th year. So these are very big junctures for both teams to prove that they're on the right trajectory, and Texas seems to be moving a little bit better in that trajectory now, record-wise at least, compared to A&M, and that's going to have effects in-state in recruiting because Texas obviously is a hotbed of talent, has great quarterback talent, great receiver talent, great cornerback talent, and so those are key positions in this league and in any league. So whoever is going to be able to show progress this year will have a leg up on being able to get some of those talents. Similar goes for Oklahoma. They had a very disappointing year last year. Again, year ones are tough when you're rebuilding or restarting a program in essence. They go to Dallas and Fort Worth and even Houston a lot. They recruit Austin, which is a very interesting dynamic to think about. It's a big year for them to show that Brent Venables has progress, because if none of those three teams really do a whole lot, nothing impressive. If none of those teams are truly competing for a conference title this year, well, that means Bama can come in, as they have in years past. They've gotten guys like the Brockermeyers, who I know one transferred out. Jalen Milroe, who could start at quarterback. He's at Alabama. Even looking at places like, Georgia has started to come into Texas and grab some top talent. Lewis Seen played for a school in Dallas after moving down from New England. So it's a really big year, because if none of those three teams show a lot of progress, then teams like Alabama, teams like Georgia, teams like LSU, especially in the Houston area, can come in and start grabbing more guys. And that's not to say of what programs like Texas Tech and Baylor and TCU could try to do to prove that even in the Big 12 that they're a place to go for talent within the state of Texas. So it's massive, because if none of these teams are able to show a lot of momentum, then it's going to have its effect on the recruiting trail. I know Texas has done well. A&M obviously had its historic class a couple years ago, but now recruits want to see those results and see what comes to bear on the football field from those classes.
How big of a believer are you in Quinn Ewers? Because Sark just the other day said, hey, if all goes according to plan, he will be a first-round pick. I don't know if he was saying right away, but obviously I got to ask you about Arch Manning, because that's a big storyline. But if Arch Manning, let's say he starts a game, does that probably means Texas did not live up to the expectations? Do you think that's fair, or what's your thoughts on that?
If Arch Manning starts a game, probably means two quarterbacks got hurt. I think right now Arch he's going to be contending for the backup quarterback position this spring or this fall with Malik Murphy, who had a real impressive spring game. But if Arch is starting games, that either means that his development curve was like a rocket ship, or that Quinn Ewers and Malik Murphy got hurt. As far as Quinn Ewers goes, it's really easy to doubt him. I get it. He skipped his senior year of high school, didn't do more than be on the scout team at Ohio State. That's 2 years of real football, and that's, you have to think about a little bit being on the scout team at Ohio State, but still, it's only just a scout team. They were concerned about Justin Fields and C.J. Stroud when he was there, if they even overlapped. So he arrives at Texas, wins a quarterback battle, and he has, he goes through a problem right away with this injury he suffered when Dallas Turner drove him to the turf in Austin. Comes back and tears up Oklahoma and probably thinks, this is just like when I was throwing it around DFW and competing for the state title. Gets a little bit in his own head. Mechanics suffer. The team doesn't do as well. And I think at a certain point, Sarkisian realizes, okay, again, I got Bijan Robinson, I got Roschon Johnson. I'm going to use these guys. And Quinn maybe lost a little bit of confidence. We did hear over at Inside Texas that he had a really good month of bowl preparation. He had to do a lot because Bijan and Roschon weren't in that game. Passing game had a lot more pressure on it, and he did well, but he still played like a freshman. True freshman even though he had that year at Ohio State. So the expectations are high, and I think when you go back to early in the winter to seeing him shave the mullet and shave his beard and kind of look more presentable, it's not like he's it doesn't mean that he's like, okay, new person, but it does show a little bit of like I'm here to take this seriously. I'm here for people to know me because I throw the football, not because I have a mullet and a weird-looking beard.
Yeah.
And I think he's taken that onto the football field. It's why Steve Sarkisian named him a starter exiting spring ball, didn't even leave really the potential of a quarterback competition there for the fall camp. And by all accounts, he's done everything he's needed to do so far. But now the next step for him is to go win games and to be the quarterback that everybody from the ranking services to all the schools that offered him believed him to be in high school.
If Texas beats Alabama in Tuscaloosa, I know that's a big if, but if they do it, is it fair to set the expectation that they should make the college football playoff?
Probably. If they can take down Alabama in Tuscaloosa, it's hard for me to see a team on their schedule that can take them down in a similar way, because aside from that trip to Alabama, Texas only leaves the state of Texas one other time this year, and that's to go play at Iowa State. They still have to go to Baylor, which is a team that's going to want to beat them. Still have to go to TCU, again, a team that's going to want to beat them, and they have to go to Houston. Those aren't the most, rowdiest of environments, but they are going to be rowdy that day for when they're there, and there's still something to be said about their home field advantage. But they're not going to have this major travel schedule.
Yeah.
They only play. Houston's the only new team in the Big 12 that they play, and honestly, I was surprised when he said this in May at a alumni event in Houston. Steve Sarkisian said, we play U of H this year. Wouldn't it be nice if we played in Houston twice this year? And I kind of did the mental math and realized, the national championship game's in Houston this year. And that's not something you really hear from Sarkisian often.
Right.
I think he understands that the expectations are to win a conference title this year, or to, at the very minimum, be in that game and competing in it. But to hear him just climb that top turnbuckle and go that far up, that was a shock to me. But I think that kind of indicates where he thinks the team could go if everything fires on all cylinders.
Yeah. Hey, I don't know if you can tell, but we like to eat. When we come down to Austin for some SEC football, where do we have to go?
All right, barbecue-wise, my favorite place is a place called Terry Black's.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's one of the best. There's lines out the door, but it's worth waiting for. There's also La Barbecue's good. Franklin's good, but it's a little bit of a tourist trap, and that's not to say that its barbecue is bad, but I think you can find better stuff without having to wait all day. Tex-Mex, if you can get into Matt's El Rancho, that's the place to go. I grew up in Houston, big Tex-Mex town there, and I think Matt's has it beat. And there's a lot of different places. It's kind of a growing food city. If you're trying to look at the tailgate scene, the four main ones I know of are Schultz's Beer Garden, which has a bowling alley and is one of the oldest establishments in Texas. Posse East, Crown and Anchor, and then Haymaker, just on the other side of 35. So those would be my top tailgate places. Terry Black's for barbecue, and then Matt's El Rancho for Tex-Mex.
Well, we're planning the first time that Texas and Oklahoma meet as SEC opponents in the World, the Texas State Fair. Mm-hmm. How should we plan to make the most of that first time at that event?
Man. So that's my favorite day of work every single year. I drive up to Dallas and I get there and I am just so excited to get there at 7:30 a.m. and hopefully they keep it at an 11 a.m. kick. That's a game that because a little bit of the surrounding area and because of the tradition, that needs to be during the daytime. Mm-hmm. But you go there, if you're sitting in the stands, before you make your stop in the stands, you buy some State Fair tickets and you get yourself a beer, get yourself a corn dog, and you just get ready for that game. And
sounds great already.
Yeah. Keep going.
When you go into the Cotton Bowl, they have updated it some in recent years, but every seat's the same. There may be about 100 luxury seats in the whole stadium, and nobody cares because they're there just for that game. And it is, I think, maybe SEC fans may be familiar with the cocktail party and how they split it long ways. And it's in a pro stadium. I know it used to be in the Gator Bowl, but now it's in wherever, M&T Bank, wherever the Jaguars play now.
Right.
It is way different, and it is the most passionate I think both fan bases get on a given year. And the Texas runs out of the tunnel. They're surrounded by Oklahoma. They hear just a chorus of boos, and then they get to a certain point about the 40-yard line where it's all cheers.
Yeah.
And you can be on your own end zone, and it could be dead quiet, and then you can drive, and you can be on the opponent's 1 yard line, and it's like you're playing at a road environment.
Yeah.
There's truly nothing like it. And I remember one of the best stories I've heard about the Red River Shootout is that Bo Schembechler, Michigan head coach, after he retired, he started doing some work for ABC Sports, and they asked him, what do you want to do? What are some of the assignments you want? You kind of get to call the shots, Bo. And he said, I want to go to Texas, Oklahoma. And I think he made a remark like, he coached Michigan, Ohio State. Those are the 10-year war or whatever he had with Woody Hayes. And he says there's nothing like this in all of college football. So it's a lot of fun. It is truly about 47,000 per side, and it is my favorite day of work every single year.
That's awesome.
Well, Joe, we appreciate you shedding some light on Texas. We're kind of ignorant when it comes to Texas, but we promise we're going to study them up this year. It's great to welcome you to the SEC. Before you go, can you tell the audience where to find all your work?
Yeah, we're part of On3. Head to InsideTexas.com, where all our social channels are Inside Texas, no spaces. And you can find me on Twitter. I'm at JosephCook89.
All right, great.
Right, thank you.
Thank you so
Absolutely,
much.
thank you.
All right, so that's going to do it for this episode of the show. The rest of the week, we're going to be recapping it just like SEC Media Days. So we're going to spend a couple teams per episode, and we're going to get you covered all week long. We've got so many interviews. And like I said, Cousin Shane's not sitting here recording, but he's in all these interviews. So he really is on the show this week, just giving the Tennessee Homer a little bit of a break before he gets back. We share some maybe behind-the-scenes stories. I kind of wanted to get into that now, but I want to wait for Cousin Shane to really soak in all the goodness here from SEC Media Days. It was our best one yet. Really appreciate all the support as we grow this podcast, this YouTube. We're really trying to make this the go-to destination for all SEC fans. And I hope that's reflected in all this content we're throwing at you. But, hey, that's going to do it for this episode of the show. I appreciate each and every one of you for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one.